Good morning. I'm Stephen Leake. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church in Mesquite, Texas, and I'm also one of the teachers of the Discipleship Sunday School class there. Today we continue with our study of the Gospel of John, and we'll finish chapter 18 and get about halfway through chapter 19 as we read the story of Jesus before the Roman governor Pilate. I'd like to remind you that our curriculum is based upon the daily Bible study series by Professor William Barclay, and that we're using the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible for our scripture readings. So we have a long scripture reading today and a short lesson. So let's get started. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus has said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priest have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate answered him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" They shouted and replied, "No, not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit. Now John 19, verse 1. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put him on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him and saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to know that I find no case against him." Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he has claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench. at a place called Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priest answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed them over to be crucified. This is the most dramatic account of the trial of Jesus in the New Testament. The drama of this passage lies in the clash and the interplay of personalities. So we will study it by looking at the actors within it. We'll begin by looking at the Jews. In the time of Jesus, the Jews were, of course, subject to the Romans. The Romans allowed them a good deal of self-government, but they did not have the right to impose the death penalty. Now, Jewish law provided for death by stoning. But Jesus had prophesied in John 12:32 that when he was lifted up or crucified, all people would be drawn to him. Therefore, Jesus had to die a Roman death because he had to be lifted up. The Jews began by hating Jesus, but they finished in hysteria, shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." And nothing in this world warps people's judgment like hatred does. And the hatred of the Jews made them lose all sense of proportion. They were so careful of ceremonial and ritual cleanliness that they would not enter Pilate's headquarters. At the same time they were worrying about those trifles, they were hounding the Son of God to the cross. The Jews did not hesitate to twist their charge against Jesus. The charge they had formulated was blasphemy. But they knew Pilate would not act on that, so they concocted a charge of rebellion and political insurrection. In order to bring about the death of Jesus, the Jews denied every principle they had. Astonishingly, they proclaimed, "We have no king but Caesar." But it was long established that God was the true king of the Jews. The hatred of the Jews turned them into a maddened mob. In their hatred, they forgot all about mercy, lost all sense of proportion, all justice, all their principles, and even forgot about God. Now we turn to Pilate. It's clear that Pilate knew that the charges against Jesus were a series of lies, that he knew Jesus was completely innocent, that he was deeply impressed with Jesus, and that he did not want to condemn him to death, and yet he did. First, he tried to refuse to deal with the case. Then he tried to release Jesus on the grounds that at the time of Passover, a criminal was always released. Then he tried to compromise by flogging Jesus. And then he made a last appeal. But he refused to put his foot down and tell the Jews that he would have nothing to do with their evil scheme. It's clear why Pilate acted as he did. The Jews blackmailed him into crucifying Jesus. Pilate's record as governor was not good. He had been reported for misconduct before, and he did not want to be reported again and may be dismissed. On that day in Jerusalem, his past rose up to haunt him. He was blackmailed into assenting to the death of Christ because his previous mistakes had made it impossible to overrule the Jews and keep his post. He tried to do the right thing, but he did not have the courage to defy the Jews. Thank you for joining me again this morning. God bless each and every one of you.